Hello everyone. Welcome to your very first video lecture here in biology. So I don't know if you've ever taken notes this way before, but it's going to be a thing that we're going to do off and on this year. Okay. I try to not lecture in class. I like to use our class time to do activities and labs and hands-on stuff. But there's some times when I need you to know certain things and vocabulary words and concepts. And so sometimes I will assign you to take notes for homework. And then in class, we get to do the fun stuff. Okay. So we're going to be doing that off and on this year. And this can be really, really helpful, not only to free up some class time to do the fun stuff, but also it's really helpful because not everybody takes notes at the same speed. And so maybe you're used to being in class and you're furiously copying down notes and the teacher moves on before you're ready. And that's really frustrating because like you're missing notes and it's hard. You're like, can you go back? Well, you'll never have to worry about that with this because you can just pause the video. Or on the flip side, maybe you're a really fast note taker and you are done taking the notes and everyone is still copying down the slide and you are like so bored and you are looking at the clock like slowly dying because you cannot move on before the rest of the class is ready. So this will also be helpful for you too, okay? It's also really great because if you are absent one day, you don't miss the notes and like have to borrow them from someone and hope their notes are good because you can watch it yourself and see for yourself what you need to learn. And then it's also a really great review tool to go back and rewatch the lecture if you need to before a quiz or something to make sure you have everything that you need to. So when we're taking notes, unfortunately, like I can't really tell you the best way to take notes because what works for one person might be different for someone else. So when you're taking notes in this class, I don't care what style you use. You might have heard there's different styles of notes like Cornell notes or outline notes. Like you do whatever makes sense to your brain, okay? But you should be writing down information as you're watching the video lecture. You do not want to write down every word that's on the slide or every word that's said. But you do want to write down any words or definitions you don't know. You want to write down big point, main idea, the overall theme. Like, yeah, you can write that stuff down too. And again, if the speed is going too fast for you, then pause it. Or if you missed something that I was saying because you're busy writing it down, then rewind or rewatch, okay? Use this as a tool so it's kind of like having me and your computer here to explain to you whenever you need it. All right, so let's get now officially started with our first video lecture. You just completed your DNA puzzle in class, so I want you to flip to the next page in your science notebook and title this page DNA Structure Notes. Okay, if you need a moment, pause the video, and when you're ready, push play. DNA, I'm sure everyone's heard of it, and I don't know how much you know about it, so let's talk about it. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. That's a long word, huh? You can see why we shortened it. And you can see where the D and the N and the A come from in DNA. DNA is going to be this master blueprint of life, meaning it gives your body instructions so that when you're growing in mom, it's the instructions on how to build a leg and how to build a liver and how to build blood vessels and all that good stuff that makes up our bodies. One of the main things that DNA does is it controls proteins being made. And as it turns out, proteins do most of the things in our cells and in our bodies. So DNA are the instructions of how to make proteins, and proteins are involved with every major process in your body. And also DNA is going to carry that information needed for reproduction. Is going to be that information that's passed from generation to generation. Okay, so there's going to be some parts of your DNA that came from your mom and some parts of your DNA that came from your dad. Now, just like a cell is the smallest building block of life, DNA has a building block too. Okay, that building block, like the fancy pants science word for that is called a monomer. Okay, the monomer of DNA or the building block of DNA is called a nucleotide. Now, this is kind of confusing because a nucleotide has parts, but that's okay. So, the parts of the nucleotide are shown right here down below. So, there's one 5-carbon sugar called deoxyribose. Okay, look, deoxyribo, there, that's where that comes from. So that it all has a 5-carbon sugar, and there's always a phosphate group, the circle thing attached here. And then there's going to be one nitrogen base over here. Okay, there are 4 different nitrogen bases, which we're going to learn about next, and that's it. So there's always going to be phosphate and deoxyribose, but what's attached over here in this nitrogen base can be one of 4 options, and that's going to change. Okay. So here we go. Here are our 4 different options of nitrogen bases. We shorten them to A, T, C, and G, or adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. Okay, so again, these four things, an adenine could go here, or a thymine could go here, or a cytosine could go here, or a guanine could go here. But they're all attached to the sugar, which is attached to a phosphate group. Okay, now adenine always, always, always partners up with thymine. See up here? So A always goes with T. And notice adenine has a double ring. See, there's this kind of hexagon-y guy and this pentagon-y guy. So adenine is always a double ring looking like this, okay? And look, thymine is a single ring like that, okay? A and T always bond together. G and C always bond together. Notice that G, guanine, is a double ring, and cytosine is a single ring. Okay, C and G go together, A and T go together. Those are called the base pairing rules. Now we give some vocabulary words to the single ring versus double ring. So notice our two double rings are called purines. So A and G are purines, and T and C are single rings, and so they're called pyrimidines. The way I remember that is that if purines are pure as gold. So purines are pure as a gold G. So purines are AG, adenine and guanine. I know it's kind of dumb, but like that's what helps me remember it. Okay, purines are pure as gold. Use it if it helps you. Okay. Here's like a general look of how A goes with T and C goes with G, and here they are attached to their 5-carbon sugar and their phosphate. So a little kind of sneak peek there. So with DNA, it's going to be in this double helix shape. What does that mean? It means think of a ladder that's all twisted, okay? And so going along the outside here is going to be sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, okay? So we call that sometimes the sugar phosphate backbone. And then the rungs, that's going to be what's going side to side, are going to be your nitrogen bases. So there's C and G, there's a rung. A and T, there's a rung. A and T, C and G, A and T. So going side to side are our bases, and going up and down is the sugar phosphate backbone. Now, the things that holds these rungs together to make them a solid rung instead of a rung with a gap in between are these things called hydrogen bonds, which you're going to learn more about those next year in chemistry. But you need to know they're bonded together. And as it turns out, you can even see on here that there's like 2 little dotted lines between A and T and 3 little dotted lines between C and G. Okay, so A and T are held together by 2 hydrogen bonds, and C and G are held together by 3 hydrogen bonds. Okay, and we have 2 strands, which means like this thing on the right is 1 strand, and this thing on the left is 1 strand. Okay, so basically imagine taking a line right here and splitting it in half. The left side would be a strand, the right side would be a strand, okay? They're complementary, which means C goes with G, A goes with T, and they're what's called anti-parallel, which you can think about it, you can see here on this picture. One side, notice all the letters here are right side up, and one side, all the letters here are upside down. So there's always half of the DNA that's kind of standing on its head, and one half the DNA that's standing on its feet, okay? This is how all DNA is. Yes, yours. Let's talk a little bit about who discovered DNA structure. You might have heard of Watson and Crick, and they were widely credited as the people who discovered DNA, and they even got a Nobel Prize for it. But they didn't get there by themselves, and in fact, there was a woman named Rosalind Franklin, which was working on DNA structure at the exact same time that they were. And she ended up taking this picture right here, which doesn't look like very much, but this picture was really instrumental in figuring out that like DNA had this specific structure with a double helix pattern and what have you. And so as it turns out, somebody in Franklin's lab gave Watson and Crick this picture without her knowledge or consent. And once these 2 guys saw this picture that she had taken of DNA, they were like, oh, that's what it is. And so then they went and they built this model and they got a bunch of credit for it. So just so you know, a lot of times in science, people work together. In this case, they weren't really working together. She was working on the exact same time and basically came up with the idea at the exact same time. But because they used her picture, they were able to kind of get it out there in the world and get more of the credit for it. So when I talk about who discovered DNA structure, I always include Rosalind Franklin because without her and her picture, Watson and Crick would not have been able to build that very first model, which they're shown with right here, of DNA. Okay, so that is it for this lecture. Hopefully you now know what DNA stands for. You know what a nucleotide is. You know the 4 types of DNA nucleotides, A, T, C, G. You understand some of the structure and a little bit of the history about who discovered DNA.